After installing the HP Aruba Networking Central on-premises software, you must set up the cluster. For example, here we have installed the following 3 Aruba Central on-premises servers while installation procedures. As part of the installation procedure, you must have already configured the FQDN and the DNS server. Please note that the DNS names cannot be changed. It has to be mapped to the servers. So now let's start setting up the COP clusters. We will first see how to get to the UI page. For that, you need to type the server IP address on the browser. On the Sign In dialog box, enter the credentials. The username is copadmin and the password is the serial number of your server. Click Sign In. You are on the first page, Cluster Setup. Here, we are showing the steps to set up a 3-node cluster. Select cluster size as 3 from the drop-down list, and as the FQDN is already configured, it will pre-populate the server details that you have selected along with the IP address. You have to now add the other 2 server details. Copy the details of server 2 and paste it. As you paste the server details, the IP address is automatically populated. Similarly, copy the details of server 3 and paste it. Here also, the IP address is automatically populated. Next, you must set up the NTP server details. You can use either secure or unsecure, but here we will select secure NTP server. Please note that secondary NTP server is optional, but primary NTP server is mandatory in the cluster setup process. Enter all the details displayed on the window under primary NTP server. You must have all the details to avoid any errors. Copy the hostname and paste it, then select the key type as SHA-256. Enter 2 in the key ID field, and then copy the pre-shared key details and paste in the required field. Click Next. It takes few minutes to move to the next page. Now you are in the central configuration page. Copy the cluster FQDN and paste it in the required field. The IP address is automatically populated. Enter the CLI password that you want to configure, and then re-enter the password. In the admin password for the GUI section, the username is pre-populated. You can configure the password and then re-enter the password. Please note that in the cluster private network section, the pod IP range and the service IP range should not conflict with your network. The pod IP range has to be /16 IP address, and it also has to be a unique IP address. Other devices in your network cannot have IP address in this range. The service IP range has to be /23 IP range, and it also must be unique. Optionally, if you want to set up the server as proxy server setup, you can check the proxy server setup checkbox. Please note that this is not a mandatory step. In case you chose proxy server setup, you must enter all the details as displayed on the screen. Here, we will now choose the server to set up as proxy. Hence, we will uncheck the proxy server setup checkbox. Click Next. Now you are in the additional setup page. If you want to set up the SMTP server, check the SMTP server setup checkbox. It is not a mandatory step. You can also set up SMTP server once the cluster is up. If you choose to set up the SMTP server now, specify the host name or IP address of the SMTP server, specify the port number, and then specify the username to access the SMTP server. Enter the SMTP server password and then re-enter the password. From the encryption drop-down list, you can select the encryption method based on your SMTP server. Here, by default, it displays SSL as the encryption type. Under Test SMTP settings, you can enter the recipient email address and click Test Email. Here we will set up the SMTP server after the cluster is up. Click Finish at the bottom of the window. The Setup Cluster Progress dialog box appears. Click Yes to confirm and start the cluster setup. The Setup Cluster Progress window is displayed. So now the cluster setup is in progress. It takes approximately 45 minutes to set up the cluster. Thank you for watching. For any queries or feedback, you can always write to us at hp-aruba-techub-india@hp.com.